Good morning, everyone, and thank you for getting a chance to come here to speak to you. I will give you a presentation with this rather long title: Government Guidance on Leadership and Management of Early Childhood Education and Care Institutions as Learning Arenas. As has been said before, this is part of it's not working. Only one person can handle this. So. This is a part of our ongoing research project, which will last for 4 years, and we are now 1.5 years into this project. And it has always also been said before, the background for this project, and also for my part of this project, which I am going to present for you, is that over the last year there has been an increased emphasis on early childhood centers as learning arenas. Research also shows that the directors of these centers, they feel an increasing pressure to make learning a higher priority in these centers. So therefore it will be interesting to see when the government is putting a higher emphasis on the early childhood centers as learning arenas. How are they then guiding or directing the centers when it comes to developing and leading the centers as learning arenas? What kind of instructions are the centers given? So how do the government agencies frame and define these new requirements for learning? And this leads to the research question for this part of the study, which is: to what extent and how do national government agencies and bodies define managerial and organizational approaches to ECECs as an arena for learning? And I will say a little bit, not much, about theoretical perspectives. It is quite similar to what Kari has already presented for you. Because we are part of the same projects, of course, some of the framing will be about the same. So I will not use much time for this, but one theoretical perspective is to look at the different functions of the leaders in the early childhood centers. This is mainly a leadership research about the leadership of the early childhood centers. But it is also connected to learning, of course, when it is the leadership of learning. So to some degree we also have to have a theoretical perspective of learning, or what views of learning can we see in the government guidance. I will not go further into that, and when it comes to learning, the views of learning or theories about learning, I will also to some degree lean on earlier research in the field or ongoing research by other researchers, as I will come back to. I will say also a little bit about methodology, which method I use. This is a discourse analysis of some central policy documents. It is a critical discourse analysis which aims at explaining what is the meaning in these central policy documents, what kind of meaning about leadership and learning can you find there, and I will try to reveal what is not so obvious when you read these documents. It is based on a selection of different policy documents, but there is one document. There's a central position. It has already been mentioned by Kari, and that is the framework plan for the content and tasks of kindergartens. There are also other documents, but this is the most central one, as it is the central guidance for the early childhood centers. I will say a little bit about the concepts or the terms that I use here. You can see that is about the task of kindergartens, and well, we don't agree with the use of the concepts they use there or the terms they use there. In different countries we have different kinds of institutions, different categories, and different names. In Norway we call all of it barnehage, and the direct translation of barnehage is kindergarten. But when you look at Australia, kindergarten in Australia, as I have understood, is something completely different. That is the first year of school. But when the Norwegian government is talking about kindergarten, they mean the institutions for children from the age of 1, or even before they are 1 year old, and up till they start school at the age of 6. But we in our research use the term early childhood education and care institutions. I will say something about my findings, the main findings, before I will go into a bit further detail to it, and I will come back to these main findings in the end. The main findings so far, this is preliminary results as it is an ongoing project, but so far I have found out that the framework plan and all the other policy documents, they say a lot about learning. They say something, but not very much, about leadership of early childhood institutions. And they say very little about the connection between these two, about learning and about leadership. And that is, of course, what is of special interest to this project. So I will go into a bit further detail to this. What does the framework plan say about learning in early childhood institutions? There are 7 learning areas in the framework plan. There's one area about maths, for example, one about language, one about society, culture. But there are no clear goals of learning. And recent research shows that when it comes to the concept of learning that is presented in this framework plan, it's a rather vague concept of learning. There's not a clear definition of what learning means. And what is also important is that learning is not seen as an aspect of its own. It is always connected to play and to care. So the framework plan talks about formation, to care, play and learning. Learning is always connected to play and care. So it's a comprehensive or holistic view of learning. And it's nothing to do with school learning. There's some main aspects about learning. Then what about leadership? As I said, there is not much about leadership in this framework plan. And there are, what is being said is, for example, in the first citation here, the head of the kindergarten, I think it's right here to translate that to director. It's the same as the director in the early childhood center. The director has an overall responsibility for the pedagogical activities being assessed in a planned, systematic and open manner. And they also have to lead their staff in carrying out these pedagogical responsibilities. And also in cooperation with parents and the staff. And I could also have said about learning. The children's perspective is also very important when I talk about learning. And children's participation. So what is repeated a few times in the framework plan is that the head of the kindergarten, the director, has an overall responsibility. But there is really not much more concrete about it. It is said in very general terms. So it's not very helpful if the director is looking for some concrete help in carrying out the pedagogical responsibility. And the plan also says that kindergartens are pedagogical centers that shall be planned, documented and assessed. Individual kindergartens are free to choose methods and scopes. So they have a lot of freedom in carrying out this responsibility and the responsibility of developing and leading the early childhood centers as learning arenas. So there are, as I said, no very concrete guidelines or directions to how to carry out this responsibility. Then, and this is my last slide, I will go back to the main findings. And that is that there is a lack of connection between learning in early childhood centers and the leadership of childhood centers as learning arenas. We got to know about something about learning, a bit about leadership, but not much about the connection. And we have also seen that there is a high degree of freedom when it comes to how to develop childhood centers as learning arenas. And I guess most of us would say that freedom is a good thing to have, to be given freedom. But it's not only easy, because if you give freedom, you are at the same time also given responsibility of how to carry out this freedom. So the directors of the centers, they have both a high degree of freedom, but also quite heavy responsibility in how to lead the early childhood centers as learning arenas. And how they carry out this freedom and responsibility is one of the main things, of course, in our overall project about the leadership of learning. Yes, so I think I'll stop there. Thank you.